What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Our show today, it is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017, getting on toward the end of the month there. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. It's amazingly busy news days. A lot of stuff going on. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the top story of the day, there has been a terror attack in London at Parliament. Right now, apparently, the suspect collided with some pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, was driving to Parliament, tried to crash through the gate, attempted to, actually succeeded in stabbing one of the guards before he was shot. Right now they're saying they've got 4 dead, including the suspect, who is described in the media as an Asian gentleman, but the Sun has published photos of the suspect being treated for his gunshot wound, and he does not look Asian at all. He looks Middle Eastern to me, so either the Sun got the wrong photo or somebody is trying to say, oh no, it was an Asian person. You know, please don't get in the way of our moving the Middle Eastern people into Great Britain and so forth and so on here. Now, getting on back to the ongoing scandals of Obamagate and Trumpgate and the rest of it, pretty much at this point, everybody has come to the conclusion that this dog and pony show in the Congress on Monday was a big fail. It's being described as a big fizzle, because all they did was get on out there and say, well, we think there's got to be something going on here, and we're investigating. We haven't found anything, but, you know, just the fact that there's an investigation, we can't trust Trump. We should negate his authority, as it were, here. Interestingly enough, they're even carrying this over to Great Britain, and yesterday we were talking about these absurd comments coming out of the Democrats and Trump's enemies here, and apparently a former conservative member of Parliament, Louise Mensch, was on a BBC show, Andrew Neil's show, and she announced she was a temporary superpower, which makes you wonder what drugs she's on. Then she went on to claim that the founder of Breitbart had been killed by Russian agents, and then called for President Trump to be impeached for having links with Russia in the lead-up to the Russian election. So they're still out there pushing this stuff. I guess they're thinking if they just tell the lie often enough and loud enough and repeat it over and over and over and over again, that eventually your brain will relent and say, okay, Trump and the Russians were swapping wet, sloppy kisses, and liberals are good and conservatives are bad. Tom Fitton, from Judicial Watch. He's the president of Judicial Watch. He was on Breitbart News Daily and basically said that the liberals, Hillary's people, Obama, the FBI, are chasing this fantasy Democrat unicorn theory of the election. And what he is suggesting is that Hillary's supporters, the liberal establishment, the establishment as a whole, just cannot accept the fact that the American people did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton, and so they're desperate to find some other villain to explain away. They're solving their hurt feelings by saying, well, it was stolen from us. We didn't really lose. The American people love the liberal agenda. The American people love Hillary Clinton. Therefore, it has to have been a stolen election. It's that same convoluted logic where they still insist to this very day that Russia stole Crimea. Well, that's not, of course, what happened. The Crimean people had 2 referendums. Referendum 1, we're going to leave Ukraine because Kiev now has a U.S. Puppet junta that is not representative of our people. We're going to leave. Then they had a second referendum saying we're going to ask to merge with the Russian republics, and that's exactly what happened. And the rationale from the United States is they refuse to recognize the right of the Crimean people to have the referendums, even though such referendums are guaranteed by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And even the UK Defense Minister, Sir Gerald Howarth, is out there saying what the Crimean people want is not the issue. Russia should respect Ukrainian borders. Now, this logic, to show you how ridiculous it is, this is like a guest at a wedding deciding that the bride did not have a right to marry this particular gentleman, therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. That's basically how ridiculous this logic is. But that's the default position right now. We refuse to recognize the will of the Crimean people, therefore, Russia has stolen Crimea. Now, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute came on out and said, what are the Russians accused of doing? We know they didn't hack the elections. NSA and FBI are saying that they can't find any evidence. They didn't change any votes. They didn't hack the voting machines. They didn't go and switch the votes. All of the vote fraud that has been uncovered so far favored Hillary Clinton. What's going on here is that the Russians exposed the fact that Hillary Clinton cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination and tried to cheat Donald Trump. And that's why they're all in a lather here. You're supposed to believe that our elections are honest. Remember back in October, Obama said, our elections are impossible to rig. And then when Hillary lost, Jill Stein came out and said, we've got to have recounts because the election was rigged. And then when the recount failed, Hillary came on out and said, Russia's hacked our election. So Trump goes into office and says, we're going to investigate whether there was election fraud last year. And immediately everybody's saying, no, don't do that. The NAACP is out there saying, investigating the integrity of the election sends the wrong message. It's discriminatory. It's racist. It's anti-Semitic. Whatever thing they can put on out there. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob, are you there? There you go.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, Mike. I was reading Zero Hedge this morning, and we've entered La La Land. There was a reference to a tweet from our good friend Maxine Waters. It just said, get ready for impeachment. I don't know what that impeachment's based on. It's all just this fantasy fairy tale of the Trump-Russian connection.
Dianne Feinstein came out with a similar comment. You know, Trump is going to leave office. It's like, in their minds, it's a done deal.
Yeah, I mean, these people are so corrupt. They're so attached to their rich lifestyles. But there was another story about the warmongering, the family of warmongers, the Kagans, including Victoria Nuland, out with op-eds in the Washington Post, the New York Times, how there has to be a further involvement in Syria. There has to be, the Republicans have to acknowledge the connection between Trump and Russia. You know what? I think Trump would be well served just to confirm that there's nothing out there. He should get on Air Force One and fly to Moscow. That would be a poke in the eye to these people. To these liberals and these globalists, that there's nothing there. I'm so confident there's nothing there. I'm going to meet with Vladimir Putin because global peace can't wait. We can't wait for this story just to die down, because it's never going to die down. He should go to Moscow or meet Putin in a neutral place, Iceland, Finland, and sit down and talk peace. Talk peace and coordinate action in Syria against the real enemies, ISIS. And he should also fire Comey, because I don't agree with your analogy about the Saturday Night Massacre. I think that was at the tail end of Watergate. I think Comey has admitted there's nothing there yet, but there's an ongoing investigation. He should just fire Comey.
I would like to see Comey gone. I think it was one of Trump's really big, dangerously naive mistakes to keep Comey on his head of the FBI. But I still think right now the timing would be awkward. Certainly the corporate media would seize on it, and even if it's not a valid parallel, they would liken it to the firing of Archibald Cox by Richard Nixon. Remember, these people are operating outside any rules of ethics, morality, truth. They're even advertising the fact we're in a post-truth society. What actually happens is irrelevant versus what we can make you believe. And they're out there still trying to reassert their ability to convince you that black is white, up is down, left is white. There really is a Santa Claus, and Hillary Clinton would have won the election if it wasn't for the evil Russians.
what do you think about my idea of him meeting Putin?
Well, I think sooner or later they're going to have to meet each other. I know they've been having phone calls and everything, but I don't know it would defuse the situation. In fact, I would expect the corporate media to say, see, he's cozying up with Vladimir Putin. He went to actually meet him. Who knows what they discussed in private? And, you know, I mean, there is, I mean, Donald Trump could walk on water, and the headlines would read, Donald Trump can't swim. Donald Trump could cure cancer tomorrow, and the corporate media would come on out denouncing him for putting all of these cancer treatment doctors out of business. There is nothing Donald Trump can do that is not going to be turned to the worst possible interpretation by that corporate media.
Very true. Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while. Mark in North Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? Mike, I don't know if you know the whole story about this crazy woman. I think she's a member of the British Parliament or something.
She's former member. Former member.
Okay. Anyway, what she said is that Putin had Andrew Breitbart murdered because Putin wanted what's his name? Bannon. He wanted Steve Bannon to take over the Breitbart website at the time, and I guess I don't think it was a radio show at the time. I think it was just her website, and that's why.
Frankly, if I'd been that host, the instant she said she was a temporary superpower, I would have called for a drug test right there on the air.
Yeah, and they call our side conspiracy theorists. They say we're wearing that tinfoil hat. You know, I mean, come on.
Well, see, here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. When, you know, a government can lie to its people only for so long, and then the credibility starts to crumble. And all they can think of doing is making the lies more outrageous and more extreme. Remember what Adolf Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf. He wrote a warning against the big lie tactic. And he warned that Germany's enemies were going to be just making more and more outrageous and extreme claims so that the shock value of the claim would bypass your normal skepticism. Oh, it's so horrible, it must be true. And that's where we're getting here right now, where they're trying to, just to keep relevant, just to keep in the media, just to keep in the public eye, the lies are getting more and more extreme, and all they're really doing is accelerating their own loss of credibility.
Well, you know, it was Goebbels who said, tell a lie enough times and people will believe it. The thing is, at the time, they didn't have the internet.
That's exactly right.
All kinds of different sources.
Goebbels is obsolete. We've made Goebbels obsolete.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, too. They've also come out, that guy, Devin Nunes, he said he got proof now that they were actually spying on Trump and his people. So...
yeah, there's a lot of that out there. I mean, all the way back to 2004, before Trump even, even if, I'm sorry, I got a message here, and I'm trying to multitask here. Yeah, absolutely, it is getting crazy out there, and we are in La La Land. You're absolutely right. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go here. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm saying that Nunes got this document. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, well, again, we know that they were spying on Trump and his associates in his business at least back to 2004, long before he ever declared that he was going to run for president. And so if they're watching him just because he's a businessman, you know, at this point, they are watching everybody. They don't want you to know it, but that denial, you know, Clapper lied under oath before Congress following Edward Snowden. And all that other stuff that came on out. We know Comey lied on Monday when he was making all these. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's also now a fact that they were actually saying that both Infowars and Breitbart. By the way, Breitbart is mild compared to you guys, to you, Infowars, and they're more establishment than anything else. That they were actually. Being spied on because they were suspected of working for the Russians. I mean, this is
no, they were being spied on to find ways of constraining and controlling them, because even though Breitbart seems to be much more cozier with the establishment than other websites out here, they were still putting out very important stories. There's a lot of good stuff comes out of Breitbart to this very day. And that may have been the real motivation for Breitbart himself to die, as it were. And then the web work may be continuing. Apparently, Media Matters' David Brock had a heart attack today. He survived it. But, you know, it's just getting kind of weird. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines, get back to the news. We got so much stuff to get through here. Apparently, they are now claiming there were 2 attackers at the Parliament. One of them is dead. The other one is still at large, and everybody's over there just trying to figure out what's going on here. Even Fox News is reporting on the House Intelligence Chairman Nunes is saying President Trump's communications may have been monitored. They're hedging it back. May have been monitored. Certainly they were here. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Over at the Washington Free Beacon, Adam Credo has reported the Department of Justice, which were sending their tech experts to the servers at Trump Tower over this alleged tie with Russia, found malware on Trump's servers that was spoofing the connection to the Russian servers. Now, gee, who would do a thing like that? And so that's what the Department of Justice has actually found. Somebody was trying to frame Trump with this whole Russia thing. Remember when they come on out and say, we found the fingerprints of Russia all over this? No, you didn't, because part of the revelations of WikiLeaks and the CIA is the CIA maintains a program called Umbrage that steals foreign malware for the CIA to use to break into people's computers and leave a false trail pointing somewhere else. So anytime somebody says we have absolute digital fingerprints that it's XYZ, no, you don't. You're looking at who you're supposed to blame for it, not who really did it. Now, let's go on back to Monday here, where Comey explained away the FBI's failure to have their technical experts examine the servers over at the DNC, because the DNC hired a company, CrowdStrike, who went on in and said, we have found evidence of Russia, and James Comey said, that's good enough for me. We don't need to send our own people over there. They're a highly respected private company. Actually, no, they are not, because now we're hearing all of these other companies that are in the industry coming out and saying, no, they're not competent. And in fact, they misread the available data. The International Institute for Strategic Studies reports CrowdStrike erroneously used IISS data as proof of the intrusion. Now, IISS has disavowed any connection to that CrowdStrike report. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has also claimed the hacking never happened. And the challenges to CrowdStrike's credibility are significant because the firm was the first to link last year's hacks of Democratic Party computers to Russian actors, and because CrowdStrike co-founder Dmitry Alperovich had trumpeted his Ukraine report as more evidence of Russian election tampering. They're part of the cover-up. They're part of the deception. They found malware on Trump's computers to fake a connection to Russia. Now, there's another aspect to this. 5 congressional staffers are now undergoing a criminal probe. These are the IT workers who were caught committing unauthorized access within the Congress. And they were kept on even though it was known that they were basically going into places they were not allowed to go. One of them worked for the former DNC chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And so if you're looking for somebody who got that DNC email out there, that's your most obvious target if you dismiss the theory that Seth Rich did it, who was then shortly after the leak killed. So there's far more evidence there pointing to these IT workers in the Congress than there is to Russia. But the narrative will be Russia, Russia, Russia. We have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, before I get to the next story here, I want to basically issue a caution. Over the last few days, we're starting to see a lot more junk, news, hoaxes, fakes being flooded onto the net. They're trying to basically jam up the communication so nobody's really sure about what's going on. Earlier today, I got flooded with 20 copies of a story that they were going to exhume Vince Foster's body on the basis of new evidence, and it was immediately apparent that the story was a hoax because Vince Foster isn't buried where they claimed, where the story said he was being exhumed from. So we need to be very, very careful. Now, that being said, I want to move on to this next story. This is from yournewswire.com. Take it with a grain of salt. Basically claiming the FBI's counterintelligence division is now investigating Google and Facebook for their cyber operations that helped Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012 and helped Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now, we all know that actually happened. Whether the FBI under Hillary's minion Comey is actually investigating is another matter entirely here. Now, again, it's on Fox News. Caller was out there saying the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee said the communications of Trump's transition officials, including President Trump himself, may have been monitored after the election as part of an incidental collection. In other words, they're trying to already spin this that, well, you know, we weren't spying on him just to, you know, get election information. You know, that was just a side effect. And yet, they don't have a crime. They don't have a crime. Now, as you know, Neil Gorsuch is undergoing his pounding before the confirmation hearings. And obviously, all the Democrats are against it. We don't want Trump's judge on the Supreme Court. We're going to fight hook, ladder, and sinker. And Ted Cruz, to his credit, stood up and reminded everybody that back when Neil Gorsuch was appointed to a federal judgeship, not a single Democrat, including Hillary and Obama, opposed him. So their attacks on Gorsuch today have nothing to do with Gorsuch himself and everything to do with having another gotcha against President Trump. It is amazing how childish these people are in these positions of power. Well, I guess when you have that much power and that much wealth, there's no real reason for you to grow up or develop any kind of maturity. You can go on behaving like children. But what kind of a message does that say to the next generation? I feel sorry for the young people of our country who are trying to learn how to be adults when our nation's leaders continue to behave like such spoiled children. Now, there's an issue that's coming up with the nominee for Secretary of Labor, Acosta. And it goes back to that Jeffrey Epstein episode where Jeff Epstein had a lot of underage girls, and he was basically looking at a lot of jail time, and everybody loved to go down to the island, which I think was stupid. If you're in politics or a position of power, and there's a guy out there saying, I have this little house in the Caribbean with lots of underage girls for you to play with, you'd have to be pretty stupid to go down there, because you got to understand, that house is going to have cameras, it's going to have microphones, and you're going to be blackmailed. So anyway, Epstein was accused of sexually abusing more than 40 underage girls between the ages of 13 and 17. And unfortunately, former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, whose confirmation hearings began this morning, made this deal with Epstein that kept him out of jail. It was basically a wrist slap. And now people are asking just why Trump appointed Acosta. I hope Trump wasn't stupid enough to walk into a honey trap blackmail operation, because I think anybody who went to Epstein's Island is being blackmailed by Epstein. I'm going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in New Zealand, there's been a little bit of a diplomatic kerfuffle. Apparently, one of the U.S. diplomats down there has been expelled from New Zealand. There was some kind of an incident. They're keeping a lid on it. and the government of New Zealand asked the embassy to waive this individual's diplomatic immunity for this police investigation. The embassy refused, and as a result, the police were unable to question him about what was going on. New Zealand has then PNG'd this particular diplomat, and it's all very hush-hush, except that New Zealand radio reported this man, who's still not named, when he left the country, he was seen with a broken nose and a black eye. So something's definitely going on over there. Over in France, boy, their corrupt politicians are dropping like flies here. French Interior Minister Bruno Le Roux has been forced to resign amid another nepotism scandal. Apparently, he hired his daughters to be his parliamentary assistants. So, a lot of corruption over there. Now then, let's get on to the media and this panic attack that the establishment is going through. And they're trying to bring back McCarthyism. They're trying to bring back censorship. They're trying to get around that pesky First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And apparently, over in California, and we already know they've gone nuts in that state, they're proposing a new law that will make it illegal for anybody in California to operate a website that makes controversial political statements to the public. Obviously, if Claire and I were still in Southern California, my website would be a target. But that's where California is going with this. And the language of the bill is misleading political statements, with, of course, California deciding what is misleading and what is not. It's government censorship of online content. Now, this is a clear violation of the First Amendment, but unfortunately our establishment doesn't feel that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights should be valid anymore. Certainly, given a choice between adhering to the Constitution and perpetuating their wealth and power, they're going to go for the perpetuating the wealth and power thing. And the heck with the Constitution, as George Bush said, it's just a blankety-blank piece of paper anyway. We can do whatever we want. We are gods incarnate. Now, one of the investigations that we are hearing about is supposedly the FBI is investigating InfoWars and a couple of other independent media outlets for connections to Russia. And apparently all it takes is you posting something from Russia Today and you are on that list. Remember the Washington Post when they came out with their list of websites that are arms of Russian propaganda, and it turned out their only rationale for claiming we were all stooges for Vladimir Putin was the fact that we had linked to articles in Russia Today. That was it. That was the entire case that they made, and the Washington Post was forced to back away from this and say, well, this is a list we got from these other people over here. But it is ludicrous what they're actually doing. I mean, I don't know about InfoWars. I think it's nonsense. I know that I'm not a stooge for Vladimir Putin. If I am, he owes me a lot of back pay at this point because I've never gotten a check. This is an attempt to smear us all, and exactly a repeat of what happened during the McCarthy era. That anybody who is not towing the line for the official story, oh, you must be a Russian stooge. You're a Russian agent, are you? We're not going to listen to you anymore because you're working with the Russians. According to another story out of IntelliHub, the FBI is also investigating websites that exposed Hillary Clinton. And classic case of trying to kill the messenger, because everything that was put out on the independent media during last year's election was usually cited from the corporate media to begin with or official government reports. And the attitude is, we don't care if this is what Hillary really did. You erred in making it public. It's the same attitude we get from Israel. Israel wants to go on being apartheid, and they want to attack their neighbors. They want to have nuclear weapons, but you're not allowed to talk about it. That's the very definition of the post-truth society. It doesn't matter if what you're saying is the absolute truth. You're not allowed to say it. So, according to McClatchy News, the FBI is now looking at the independent media websites who put out things about Hillary Clinton that may have worked against her election. Well, in the days before the Internet, people would talk to each other about the candidates. And those who had compromising information would verbally share it. Didn't make them Russian stooges, didn't make them operatives. It's called political dialogue. And political dialogue is first and foremost what is protected by that First Amendment. The First Amendment isn't really there to cover exotic dancers or art canvases with bovine poo stuck to them. The First Amendment is so that we, the people, can share our honest opinions about the politicians back and forth without fear of retaliation. And we are seeing the establishment, the deep state, basically dropping what's left of the Bill of Rights in the shredder in their desperate attempt to hang on to power, wealth, and control. And it's really not working. Over at Blacklisted News, they have a wonderful article, Our Hopelessly Dysfunctional Democracy. And it says what we're all waking up and realizing. Democracy here in the United States has become a hollow shell. And basically saying if the citizenry cannot replace a dysfunctional government or limit their power, or limit the power of the financial aristocracy at the ballot box, the nation is a democracy in name only. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. We, the people, voted for Donald Trump last year. He won that election by the rules everybody agreed to play by, despite massive election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. And they don't want to respect that. They're trying to get rid of Trump and put the establishment back in power, and that tells us we don't have a democracy anymore. We're living under a dictatorship. They want you to believe we have a democracy, believe our elections are honest. They had elections in the old Soviet Union. Didn't really change anything. As Stalin used to say, people who vote decide nothing. People who count the votes decide everything. The corporate media is still on attack mode regarding Donald Trump, and his new budget is coming on out, and the media is out there saying, oh, he's going to cut this, he's going to cut that, he's going to cut this, he's going to cut that. He's cutting all these things for the people. And to pick just one example, one of the big lies coming out of the media is that the Meals on Wheels program is going to be cut completely. And contrary to those news reports, President Trump is not eliminating funding for Meals on Wheels. He's not even cutting it. In fact, it's not even mentioned in the budget outline at all. And Meals on Wheels themselves have issued a statement saying it's not true. It's just not true at all. They're just trying to make things up to make you distrust and hate Donald Trump. And given those statements by Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein, it does look like they're going to try some kind of a coup d'etat here. And if anybody from the Trump administration is monitoring this show, you got to send him a message. He's got to stop playing defense. He's got to go on the offense. He's got to regain the initiative, or they're going to succeed in getting him out. Obviously, Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein know something is going on. They're still pushing this Trump is a Russian patsy, and they may just try and invoke the 25th Amendment saying, well, we can't trust him. We're not sure. Even though the investigation has found nothing at all linking Trump to Russia, we dare not take the chance that he's a Moscow candidate. All the time, of course, ignoring all the millions of dollars from Russian sources that flowed into the Clinton Charitable Foundation and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Why isn't anybody asking if the Clintons were Russian spies? It's a hatchet job against the elected President of the United States of America. And I do not agree with everything Donald Trump is doing. In many ways, I'm very disappointed with him. But he is the elected President of the United States of America, and under the rules of our country, that's just the done deal until the next election. Now, getting into the war zones, We're getting a report now from the southfront.org. The moderate opposition, you know, the good terrorists that are supported with your tax dollars, have now officially formally united with Al-Qaeda to launch an attack in Hama. Remember when Obama was out there saying, well, there's ISIS and Al-Qaeda and you should be afraid of them, and then there's the moderate terrorists that we're going to help and support and give weapons to. And somehow those weapons given to the moderate terrorists always wound up in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Looks like they were buddy-buddy all along here. Now, Bashar al-Assad is out there saying the so-called white helmets, they are Al-Qaeda. That's proven. And still the Western corporate media treats them as some kind of humanitarian hero. They're a propaganda device, is what they are. Now, as you know, there is a building crisis in Syria where Israeli warplanes flew into Syria and bombed Syrian forces in order to protect ISIS. And the Syrians shot back, and Israel got really upset. How dare you shoot at our warplanes who are bombing your country? What's wrong with you? That's not supposed to happen. And it kicked up a bit of a stink here, to where finally Russia came on back and said, your freedom to operate over Syria is over. And to punctuate it, Russia launched a cruise missile attack against those terrorists Israel was trying to protect. Well, now Netanyahu is saying, we're going to go on bombing Syria whenever we want. And according to the Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu is now saying that no, he has not received a message from Vladimir Putin that he's not supposed to go into Syria any longer. That is a very, very dangerous situation. If Israel goes into Syria again with their warplanes, Russia may respond. That opens up the door for all these war hawks who want a war with Russia and think it's really good. And by the way, over the next commercial break, I'm going to put up a document on my website. It's the official enlistment form for the military services, and I want you to download it and print out a whole bunch of copies. And from now on, any time that you see anybody saying, well, we really should go into Syria, or we should go back into Libya, or we should do this, just whip one of those out and say, here, sign up. I know where the military recruiting offices are. You just sign your name on that. I'd be happy to drop it off on my way home. Because I am sick and tired of people demanding everyone else go over to these war zones to be killed and crippled, but they've always got a reason to stay here at home. Let's put them on the spot. Let's see you walk your talk. You really think that there should be a war against Bashar al-Assad? Why are you not on the front lines then? Now, we had a campaign doing that a few years ago, more than a few years ago, back during Iraq. And it was actually so successful that people who had these enlistment forms were being blocked from going in to rallies in favor of the war. And the excuse the goon squad used was, well, you're going to make those who want to go fight in the war but can't feel bad. Therefore, we're not going to let you in. That's how ridiculous that was here. Now, apparently the battle for Mosul is entering its final stage, which sounds really good until you try and figure out what the American motive is for being there. There are huge civilian casualties, but it's no big deal. It's just not worth talking about, the civilian casualties. God, you people are such sissies and bleeding hearts worrying about civilian casualties. Now, as of the 26th of this month, the Saudi-led and U.S.-supported war in Yemen will turn 2. And how we got in that mess is really very simple. The U.S. went into Yemen. They had a regime change. The people of Yemen did not like their new U.S. puppet rulers and tried to kick them out. And the current war is the U.S. and Saudi Arabia going back in and saying to the people of Yemen, you will accept foreign puppet rule or we will starve you to death. And right now, Yemen, which is already a very, very poor country, they have massive famine there. The United States government is starving the civilian population of Yemen into surrendering to foreign puppet rule. So the next time somebody comes on out and says Russian aggression or Chinese aggression, you point them at this and say, who's the aggressor right now? Who is really the aggressor in all of these conflicts we've seen for the last 15 years? Now, apparently Libya is fighting back against their foreign puppet rulers. Of course, what the corporate media is saying, ISIS is regrouping in Libya. It's a powder keg. We're going to have to invade Libya again and put in a new foreign puppet government. Here a war, there a war, everywhere a war, E-I-E-I-O here. Now, a little bit of propaganda that's ramping on up. Israel is claiming that the latest arms convoy that they bombed in Syria, which led to this kerfuffle with Putin, contained North Korean missiles, all, of course, sourced with anonymous people not authorized to talk about it. How you would tell it's an advanced North Korean missile after you've bombed it into rubble, a little bit of a mystery. But Israeli media is trying to sell the idea that North Korea is behind all of this militarism in Syria. If those North Koreans would just mind their own business, Assad would have been gone long ago. Frankly, I'm not buying it. One tiny bit. And by the way, let's be very honest. If Israel and the United States are sending in arms to the terrorists inside Syria, why can't North Korea send in weapons as well? Where did this double standard come from, where America is allowed to ship weapons all over the planet, but nobody else is? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, this is one of the areas where obviously I do not agree with the Trump administration. The United States is boycotting the United Nations Human Rights Council session, focusing on Israel's human rights violations against the Palestinians, claiming that the United Nations is a bunch of Jew-hating anti-Semites who want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Now, obviously, for anybody who's actually studied what's going on over there, it is a terrible, terrible situation being imposed on those people of Palestine by the Israelis. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, Michael Link, has described the Israeli occupation as the most malignant in the world. And basically says Israel is just imposing alien rule over 5 million people against their wishes, which inevitably leads to the repression of rights, the erosion of the rule of law, the abrogation of international commitments, and the imposition of deeply discriminatory practices. Boy, that sounds like apartheid to me. Now, Israel may be getting very, very tired of all this talk about apartheid, and they may be getting ready to do something very nasty about it, because we're seeing a story that came out of the Daily Star that Israel is now preparing for a new war on Gaza and Lebanon. They still want that Litani River. So they're going to get all the weapons loaded and all the weapons warmed up, and then some Israeli stooge inside Gaza will fire a bottle rocket into an empty lot on Israel's side of the fence, causing no damage, harming nobody, and Israel will go on in, as they do every 2 to 3 years, and flatten Gaza. And say, they made us do it, Mommy. They're the bad people. Boy, oh boy. Sweden apparently has decided to reactivate their Cold War bunkers over fears of Russian invasion. Back during the Cold War, a lot of people made a lot of money building bunkers for civilians, or for at least for the government, and they were all stocked with all kinds of emergency food and everything. And I remember when I was back in the 1970s, there was a shopping mall near our home that had a civil defense fallout shelter in the basement, and I was very curious about it. And one day I saw the doors were open, and so I just walked on in, and I found a work crew just throwing everything out because it had all been allowed to rot. It was just a joke, this idea that we had these civil defense shelters all over America where we could go and survive a nuclear war. There wasn't anything there that you could use. It had all rotted away years before it wasn't being replaced. And of course, this idea that Russia is going to invade either Europe or the United States is ludicrous. Look at the EU and the US. On the verge of bankruptcy, crippled by corruption and open borders, why would Putin want to take on those problems? He wouldn't. He's just going to sit back and let the European Union and the United States collapse on their own. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got a caller waiting on the line, but I want to do a couple more stories before we go back to the phones here. As if those poor people in Ukraine did not have enough problems. They've already had Chernobyl. Apparently, there is a large area of industrial storage units of chlorine gas. And concern has been raised because on February 24th, a stray artillery shell hit the Donetsk filter station's chlorine gas depot, which stores around 7,000 kilograms of chlorine gas. Now, fortunately, on that incident, none of the units were damaged. But if that place were to come under artillery fire and those tanks be breached, that would be a major chemical disaster for those people in Ukraine. But it's a small price to pay to win the war. Now, interesting little observation from Activist Post. Donbas and East Ukraine are on their way to becoming their own country by default because it looks more and more like Kiev and Poroshenko are on the verge of collapse. They have borrowed more money than they can ever repay. They're still out there begging for more to keep going. And a lot of the people in the European banks and the global banks are starting to put their wallets away because it's a losing proposition. And so it may, in fact, all fall apart. And all of this misery, all of this destruction, over the argument over which piece of paper and colored ink everybody's going to use here. Now, over in Belarus, armed provocateurs have been arrested. Several dozen militants preparing an armed provocation have been arrested. And a new color revolution, a new coup d'etat, a new overthrow. Lukashenko is pointing the finger of suspicion at Ukraine, Lithuania, and Poland. I would point the finger of suspicion at George Soros here. Now, we're seeing this story that came, well, I'll tell you, I'm going to take a phone call before I get this next story. Pat in Arkansas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. May I refer you to a very excellent documentary about organic farming? This small group of farmers in Illinois have gotten together and started getting back to the farm and working directly with the chefs in the restaurant. And the name of the documentary is Sustainable. I just sent you an email. And
yes, I'm seeing it. Yeah, it's right here. It's right here. I'm definitely going to look at that. One of the problems that organic farmers are dealing with now is the FDA is coming on in and saying they can't sell their natural organic food without it going through the very expensive certification process imposed by the USDA and the FDA. And of course, this very costly certification, this certification program is designed to crush down the small independent farmers who can't afford this in order to keep the business focused on the large agricultural corporations who can afford the paperwork burden.
Well, it's very time-consuming and expensive if they really go organic, but there are a lot of them, small farms throughout the country that are dedicated to this really sustainable thing. And, of course, the government and Monsanto is going to do everything they can to squash them.
Absolutely.
And these are kind of little sales of farmers and co-ops throughout the country. But I thought I'd let you know about it. That DVD is excellent. I viewed it on our Netflix channel.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the link, and I'll put it up there during the next commercial break. So, Pat, thank you very much for the information. And obviously, being a farm kid myself, I have a great deal of sympathy for these small farmers around the country who are literally being blockaded from being farmers in order to keep the large corporations fat, wealthy, and happy in exchange for generous campaign donations every election. All right, so we're looking at this story over here. This is at Associated Press. The U.S. military is expecting another North Korean missile launch in the next several days. Harumph, harumph, harumph. See how provocative they are. Well, the last missile launch was actually a satellite launch test. Not a military missile, an orbital launcher for communication satellites, weather satellites, whatever they want to put on up. But they're out there acting like everything North Korea does is a provocation leading toward war. And we need to go back and always keep in mind, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Saddam's nuclear weapons, Pearl Harbor was a surprise, honest, really, truly, I wouldn't lie to you, I'm the president. I'm smelling a false flag on the way because obviously with all this talk about imposing new sanctions on North Korea, it signals that Tillerson was not able to get any cooperation from mainland China, which I don't know why he was expecting that given the odds over the East China Sea. And Tillerson did not get any cooperation from the interim president of South Korea, who may wind up the permanent president of South Korea following the elections. Because that interim president of South Korea is still following what's called the Sunshine Policy, which was the name that was given to efforts to reunify Korea the way Germany was reunified. And 5-6 years ago, they were talking about a new united Korea, and the U.S. went on in and just mucked it all up again, because they love a good war. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. China has issued a warning to an Air Force B-1 bomber flying in the East China Sea. The U.S. is insisting it's still international airspace. But there's a bit of a problem there. International airspace, territorial waters, were set a long time ago. And you can have a B-1 bomber flying in international airspace, and it's still within striking distance of cities on the Chinese mainland by virtue of air-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles. So China is seeing how belligerent and provocative the United States is being, and they're exercising a certain amount of caution. Now, China is still maintaining that that whole area belongs to China. By virtue of the 1898 Treaty of Paris, the 1900 Treaty of Washington, the 1930 Convention between the United States and Great Britain, not to mention the Cairo Convention, all say these islands all belong to China. Interestingly enough, back in 1994, Rand McNally, in their Atlas of the World, shows that Huangyang Dao, Nansha Islands, and Xisha Islands fall under Chinese jurisdiction. Now, Rand McNally is not a Chinese propaganda arm. They operate out of Chicago. It's another big lie to sell you a war. Japan has just launched their second large helicopter carrier to protect against Chinese aggression. Isn't it kind of weird that for all the talk about Russian and Chinese aggression, it's the U.S. and its allies that are just cranking out the weapons and building the bombs as fast as they can, not to mention dropping them. Oh, and you want to talk about whining? I love this one. This is from Russia Insider. Apparently the Pentagon is wringing their hands and crying that Russia and China have an unfair advantage because they're not dropping bombs on countries full of brown people, and they're able to spend their much more meager military budgets actually building up-to-date modern weapons. And that's just not fair. That's just not fair. You American people have to give us more money. I think we've given you enough. Why don't you find out where that missing $6 trillion went? Spend that. Let us off the hook here. All right, I want to take a phone call. Graham in Indiana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael. Thanks for letting me on the show. Hey, I just had a quick comparison. I was re-listening to yesterday's thoughts you were mentioning China and Taiwan. Would you say, is it fair to equate Taiwan's independence with Palestine and wanting to become, it's kind of recognized as a nation as well? I mean, those things kind of stuck out to me in a comparison yesterday, and I'm wondering, because China's like really indignant to say, no, Taiwan is ours. And so is that kind of a fair comparison, or am I out of it?
Well, no, there's certainly a lot of parallels in there, but all of this goes back to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which every nation that is a member of the United Nations is supposed to abide by. And in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right of a people to self-determination is guaranteed, even if that means saying, we're now an independent sovereign nation and we're no longer connected with this government over here. Now, obviously, this China-Taiwan situation has been festering for a long time. I think from China's point of view, their motivation is a blend between obviously capturing the economic powerhouse that Taiwan has become, along with a certain amount of ego. And when you're dealing with Asian countries, China and Japan especially, there's a cultural tradition about saving face, of not looking like you're backing down, and it's a lot more intense there than you would find in the West, which tends to be a little bit more in the spirit of a compromise. And I think for China's old guard, the hardliners, allowing Taiwan to be independent would be seen as a personal failing for them. It's a lousy way to run foreign policy, but that seems to be what's going on over there.
Okay, I gotcha. Hey, just a quick, I've been called a master of the obvious, but this is a little bit different tone here, but with the economy and infrastructure, I've done some traveling today and lately through Baltimore and Maryland, and the roads are just pitiful. I hear you say Hawaii is like #1, but Baltimore's got to be pretty close to #2, because it's scary to go driving across a bridge that's being held up concrete rebar over water, and there's holes in rebar showing that it's rusted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just kind of a scary comparison to whatever's going on, and where, and then their way of solving issues is they throw up a yellow sign to warn motorcyclists that there's gaps, and to watch out for the gaps in the road instead of repairing them. I'm like, what? Is that your insurance policy? What is that?
Yeah, it's really bad, and a lot of our commerce inside the United States is handled by these giant semi-rigs, and the interstate highway system is in decay. Somebody was putting up these videos shot from the cab of one of these cross-country tractor-trailer rigs, and just looking out the windshield, you can see all these cracks and pits and areas where the pavement is just literally stripped off. And you can hear it in the cab, all the noise that's being made. And we're seeing this attempt to say, well, we don't really need to maintain the railroad system anymore, because the future of commerce in the United States are driverless trucks that will go from point to point all by themselves. Well, the trucks are going to have a really, really hard time, the way the trains are having a really hard time on the current condition of the rail system. FedEx apparently came out with a study that showed they're going through tires on their FedEx trucks twice as rapidly as the original business model allowed for, due to the deteriorated condition of all the roads. We have a lot of places in the United States where local governments are not maintaining paved roads anymore. They're letting them go back to gravel, which, of course, also wears out your tires. It causes harm to the car, paint chips and so forth, because we've been living in a wartime economy now for almost a quarter of a century. They don't want you to realize that's what's going on. But every bit of wealth taken from the American people by one way or the other, it's basically going into the war machine. And, it really is a wartime economy, and we need to get out of it if we're going to be able to rebuild our nation.
Well, it's certainly becoming more and more evident. Hey, thanks so much for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jim, are you there?
You got me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I got these Muslim questions for you, and I'm wondering.
I'm not Muslim.
Kind of when we're going to stop it. You know, like, kind of we're going to, like, say either you take care of your problem or we will.
Well, we're starting to see that. We're seeing that very same attitude start to emerge all over Europe, where these politicians who are on board with globalism and New World Order are facing a furious backlash. We've reached the point where very obviously the elections in all of these countries are being rigged to serve the globalist agenda. And as we said earlier in the show, if the people of a country cannot replace a dysfunctional government at the ballot box, then it's not really a democracy. And I think the people of Europe are starting to wake up to that right now.
Right, right. But you know, I listen to you every day. You know, whenever time I can get, you know, I work a lot, so I get you on YouTube on Gibson's channel, and I don't know, man. I think we're letting it go too far. I think it's going to go too far. I think there's going to be some serious shit with these people.
Okay, got to be careful about your language on this radio.
Sorry, I'm sorry, sir.
Because of our, our on-air affiliates are operating under FCC licenses, and even though our government is dropping white-hot flaming death on innocent people around the world and torturing Iraqis to death to find nuclear weapons that never existed, we are not allowed to use bad words on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people.
We got to find something. We got to find some happy medium real quick.
You just stepped all over my punchline.
It's not good, man. As I say, it's not gonna. The ending ain't gonna be good.
Unfortunately, no. And like I said, I'm seeing either a world war that we're going to lose, or an economic implosion and collapse of the U.S. government in the same manner as the former Soviet Union. Neither one are pleasant to contemplate. I had somebody who wrote on in and said, well, what about a Soros-style color revolution? And I reject that as a possibility simply because for any of these color revolutions to work, it must have the majority of the general population convinced that the color revolutionaries mean what's best for the country and represent the people of the country, that they're organic, that they're indigenous. And Soros and his people don't have that. The American people understand these are hired thugs to create chaos, to steal what's left of our nation away from us. Anyway, Jim, got to let you go. Coming up on a commercial break. Thanks an awful lot.
Good talking to you, man.
All right, thanks a lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, Trump is planning on taking part at the NATO summit in May. Interestingly enough, Tillerson will not. He's apparently going to be flying somewhere else. But Trump will take part in the NATO summit in May to basically talking about rebalancing responsibility sharing and the role in the fight against terrorism. So Trump is sending a message. NATO's going to have to pay for more of its own defense instead of the United States, and the focus should not be on Russian aggression, but the terrorists. And that, I definitely agree with him. Now, there's a video that was linked to whatreallyhappened.com coming from the Daily Mail in Great Britain. U.S. military tests Star Wars electromagnetic railgun that fires projectiles at 4,500 miles per hour and can penetrate concrete 100 miles away. I had serious concerns about this. First of all, being able to accurately aim a projectile 100 miles away that can survive, shoved out of the cannon. But when you look at the video, there's a flash of light and smoke coming from what is supposed to be an electromagnetic weapon. And when they show the slow-motion clips of the projectile coming out, I'm not seeing any indications of a shock wave that would confirm supersonic speeds. So maybe they're hoping that somewhere down the road it will fire projectiles at Mach 6. But I was not really impressed with the demonstration that's in the video. It looks, in fact, it looks like a sales pitch from the company making this thing. And we know how much fraud there is in military contractors. And again, go back to the Pentagon Wars. Trump and the European Union are in a standoff over the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. Trump is very much opposed. The EU is trying to find some way to shame him into going along with this. More when we come back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show today. And the situation over the surveillance of Trump is starting to really come on out. And apparently Nunes has dropped the word may have from his description about what's going on. He is now confirming there was surveillance of Trump. And now he's saying that it had nothing to do with Russia. So it is a new Watergate. It is a new Watergate. Now, remember back how long it was between the arrest of the burglars at the Watergate Hotel and Richard Nixon's resignation. Didn't happen overnight. It took a long, long time of people working to get the truth out there. And it will probably be just as long now. But at this point, Nunes is saying Donald Trump's tweets about being surveilled are accurate. And apparently down at Freedom Watch, they sent a letter to Nunes with more information. This is from Larry Klayman. And Larry Klayman is a well-respected name. He's been an anti-corruption activist going all the way back to the Vince Foster case. So getting on back to the economic news, Trump and the European Union are in a standoff over the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Now that treaty, along with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, are a core foundation of the coming New World Order. And Trump is opposed to them. Trump wants to run America's economy for the benefit of America's economy. I obviously agree with him on that one. And the globalists are trying to find some way to shame Donald Trump into reversing his position, saying that, oh, he's coming from this I win, you lose point of view. Well, in any deal, yeah, that's generally how these things start. Now, I know we like the idea of a win-win situation. It's always good to look for. But the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership were never about win-win. It was about the globalists win, all of you lose. Now, proving once more that members of Congress can be pretty darn clueless. Over at in Idaho, the Democratic Idaho House Minority Leader Matt Erpelding came on out with the following bizarre statement. Okay? In 1868, gold was $27 an ounce. Today, it's $1,218. So you can't say gold will protect us from inflation. I mean, that has to set a new record for complete idiocy from a politician who obviously doesn't understand that gold has retained its value all along. It's the paper dollars that have inflated. And if you lock the paper dollars to the gold, they will not inflate any longer. Man is totally clueless. Either that or he's in the employ of the private central bankers who don't want to give up this little scam they have of creating money out of thin air, or creating currency out of thin air, and loaning it into circulation at interest. Now, Sears is expressing substantial doubt about its future. At this point, they are in serious, serious trouble. They're now acknowledging they may not be able to keep their doors open. And they're already looking for companies to buy off some of its subunits, like the Craftsman tool. I think that one's already in play. Payless will be filing for bankruptcy as soon as next week. We don't have a consumer economy anymore. We have a wartime economy. We have a money junkie economy. We're living under economic fascism. And the problem with economic fascism is that sooner or later it concentrates all the wealth at the very top until there is nothing left over for ordinary people to run the economy with. We're already seeing that in Greece, where companies are now paying their employees with coupons from the local supermarket. I don't think they're going to be able to hold it together much longer. Had a bit of a scare on the stock market yesterday. It's still struggling, trying to regain the momentum upward. Even the PPT can't keep this thing together anymore. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And J.C. Penney is in serious trouble right now. And in their case, there's another factor besides the fact that customers don't have any money anymore. They're going to be closing 138 stores by the end of April, end of next month. In their case, their downfall appears to be from being politically correct. Remember what happened to the big box stores that all said, oh yes, we're going to go along with the, you can use whatever restroom you identify with, which led to a lot of girls and women being attacked by very strange guys. And their customers left. They didn't feel safe inside the store. Well, apparently, back in 2012, JCPenney's CEO Ronald Johnson got it into his head to improve JCPenney's by catering to homosexuals. That they were going to say, we're gay-friendly, you can come on in here, you can do whatever you want. Well, it was politically correct, but fiscally not very well thought out, because gays make up only 2 to 3% of the U.S. population. And so, yes, they were going to JCPenney, but that segment of the American population, much larger, that may not be comfortable with the gays, decided to go someplace else. And that's what put JCPenney basically in a death spiral. And we seem to have had this very ugly trend of the heads of large corporations just say that I'm going to turn my store into political correctness. Remember when Starbucks did the thing, we're going to hire 10,000 refugees, and sales plummeted, and the CEO has now been forced to step down. Now, if you're over in Illinois and you are buying a lottery ticket, you might want to think twice about that. Now, obviously, in Illinois, they're still running as buy a lottery ticket. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. Well, unfortunately, if you get a lottery ticket that is worth more than $600, you will not actually get the winnings. And apparently, the state of Illinois is refusing to pay lottery winners an estimated $288 million. And according to Illinois politicians, the reason is they have not balanced the budget in that state. I don't think anybody has. And so they have arbitrarily declared anyone who has won more than $600 in the lottery will not get their winnings, period, end of discussion. It's not even a delay. It's not even an IOU. That's it. We're cutting off the winnings at this level. I mean, lotteries are bad enough, but to actually win and then be told by the state, we've decided we're not going to pay you off. Now, Rand Paul is predicting that Ryan's health care plan will probably fail. In fact, Ryan may be forced to pull it before it even gets to a vote because there's no support for it, mostly because Ryan Care or Obamacare, the sequel, basically keeps many of the main structures of Obamacare that people are most opposed to. It is still a pander to the health insurance corporations. They just tried to repackage it to make it a little bit more acceptable, but it's the same old product. High policy cost, high deductibles, and health care that remains unaffordable. Now, we're getting an update out of London. Apparently, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is out there saying that Islamic terrorism is just part and parcel of living in a big city. He's out there saying it just doesn't, you're just going to have to get used to it. Like they're up in Sweden, they're saying you're just going to have to get used to the fact that your daughters are going to get raped. It's just part and parcel of being part of the New World Order. And I mean, yes, people are being killed, terror attacks, girls are being raped. It's a small price to pay for the New World Order. just share the dream with us of a one-world government, one-world private central bank, and you'll realize that all this death and misery and crime and suffering is really just, it's just the cost of doing business here. Now, apparently over in Macedonia, George Soros has been in there. They're trying to kick him out. And apparently it's not just Soros they're getting ready to kick him out, because 50,000 Macedonians have taken to the streets telling Brussels to get the heck out of their country. They're tired of Brussels meddling in the nation's domestic politics to the detriment of Macedonia and the Macedonian people. Apparently there were 42 rallies across the country, and they're very angry. And this is hardly confined to Macedonia. The European people are sick of the European Union. They want to go back to being their own sovereign states. They're already making plans for that to happen. Apparently Great Britain and Germany are already in discussions about a mutual defense treaty that will take effect as soon as Brexit is formally completed. Trump is fast-tracking trade deals with an independent Great Britain. The globalists are failing, thank goodness. But don't expect him to go away quietly. Now, as you know, Donald Trump, as part of his security for the country, is banning large electronic devices on flights from the countries on his travel ban list heading to the United States of America. Cell phones are okay. You can have cell phones in the cabin. Everything else, laptops, tablets, anything larger, have to be in the checked baggage. Now, it sounds like a good idea, and for security it is. The problem is luggage gets looted all the time. I had a Walkman taken out of my luggage at Heathrow Airport in Great Britain. And so a lot of people are going to lose their electronics. TSA has been caught stealing pads out of luggage more times than I can admit. But it seems like a lot of people think this may be a good idea. Apparently they're concerned about explosives or something else fitting in these larger pieces of electronics. Obviously there's not a lot of spare room in a cell phone. But apparently Great Britain is following suit. They are going to require that flights coming to Great Britain from Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, and Saudi Arabia not allow large electronic devices in the cabin. They will have to be put in the checked baggage here. Now, Erdogan, boy, I got to tell you, talk about a loose cannon on the deck. Remember last week where he was out there screaming about how the European Union had to set up elections for Turkey, for the Turkish nationals living in Europe, who are still eligible to vote in the Turkish referendum because they have not surrendered their passports. Then he came on out and said it was the duty of Turkish people living in Europe to have at least 5 babies per couple in order to make Europe Turkey. And now he's out there saying that if this diplomatic spat between Turkey and these European countries continues, that he guarantees Europeans will not be able to walk safely on their streets. It really is getting crazy out there. Okay, now then, as you know, we had this horrible story the other day of this high school in Maryland, Rockville, Maryland. 2 illegal immigrants who'd enrolled in the school for remedial English grabbed a girl, dragged her into the men's room, put her in a stall, and did quite a lot of sexual things with her. I don't need to go into the details. And the Trump administration has come on out and saying this highlights what's going on in these sanctuary cities. These mayors and governors of the sanctuary cities and sanctuary states are exposing their traditional indigenous populations to these crimes. All to be politically correct. And I think the Trump administration would be fully justified now in going into all of these sanctuary whatevers and start slapping these politicians with Title VIII violations. But it is an ugly, ugly situation. Now, here is an interesting story. This came out of Investment Watch blog. A psychologist speaks out, psychiatry profits from lying to the public about mental disorders. And we have talked before about how the modern psychiatric industrial complex is out there to sell you pills, prescription antidepressants, whatever on else. They make up diseases. The guy who came up with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder admitted shortly before he passed away that it was a purely fictitious disease to sell medication to people who didn't really need it. And the Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual, they update it every year, literally is defining every possible human behavior as a mental illness. They've even defined the desire to eat safe, healthy food as a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. So we have this clinical psychologist, Dr. Toby Watson, former chief psychologist for the state of Wisconsin Department of Corrections, and the past international executive director of the International Society of Ethical Psychology and Psychiatry. And he has become an outspoken critic of the psychiatric industry. And he's questioning this idea that mental disorders are biological or medical conditions, because there is, in fact, no evidence to back up that claim. This idea that you can treat a mental illness with a pill. And he has testified before the FDA on the dangers of SSRI antidepressants. He's testified before the Congress of Mexico against psychotropic drugging of children. And he spent the last 15 years going around saying how these psychotropic drugs can cause violent and suicidal behavior. It's nice to get a little vindication or validation. We've been saying this for a long time, that there is a huge body of evidence that prescription antidepressants within a certain subset of the patient population cause more problems than they solve. And they're trying to hand these things out like they're M&M candies or something. There's a website called ssristories.org. If you go over there, there are hundreds and hundreds of these documented cases of perfectly normal, healthy people who were given these medications by the doctor, and they blow up, they become addicted. Virtually all of the mass shooters wagged at us by the gun grabbers were either on or withdrawing from these medications. And it's when you're withdrawing that you're at greatest risk of aberrant behavior. Now, the ones that make the news, of course, are the mass shooters, but we did a little study ourselves here where we took a chart of the per capita incidence of domestic violence, and we laid it over the per capita consumption of prescription antidepressants, and there's a very strong correlation. Right now, a quarter of Americans are on these medications. I assume the number is probably higher for our politicians, which would go a great distance to explain Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. We know from a study done down in Florida that police officers are higher per capita users of these medications. And have we not in recent years seen completely ridiculous behavior by the police officers? Killing innocent people, stealing from them. We had a story on whatreallyhappened.com where apparently a cop just decided to taser this dog, even though the dog was not presenting a threat. It was just sitting there, you know, happy, hi, how are you? And the police officers just decided to tase him. Because one of the things these medications do is they erase your impulse control. You get an impulse into your head, you're just going to go with it. One of the cases over at ssristories.org is a young man who tried to commit suicide. And they got to him in time. When it was all over, they said, "Why'd you do it?" And he said, "I don't know. It just popped into my head and I couldn't help myself." And I had a personal experience with these medications many, many years ago. It was following the breakup of my first marriage. And I went to my doctor for a completely unrelated matter. And while I was there, she said, you know, how you're handling the breakup of your marriage. And I said, well, you know, can't have that happen and remain entirely cheerful. And she said, well, you need this. And I wish I could remember name of the medication she put me on. But very trusting, naive, believing in the medical establishment, I took the medications according to the instructions on the label, and for about 4 weeks I was happy. I was fun to be with. I was being invited to parties. And then that 5th week, there was a backlash that just put me in the blackest possible depression. And I literally was like huddled in the corner of my apartment just saying, it's the chemicals, the chemicals, the chemicals. The only way I got through that. And I will not touch those medicines ever again. So now we have this trained, accredited psychiatrist out there saying, yeah, this is a real problem. And we look at the behavior of our government leadership as a whole, when you look at the behavior of our corporate leadership, especially on Wall Street, you have to ask a question. That is our nation literally drugging itself into insanity? And how much of this bizarre behavior, willingness to cheat customers and investors, the pedophilia epidemic, how much of that is being caused by these medications? Somebody needs to look at that. I think there's a serious, serious problem there. It's not going to go away until people confront it. The first step in dealing with any problem is acknowledging it's there. Obviously, the pharmaceutical industries want to go on saying, this stuff is wonderful, keep taking your pills, soma, keep you drugged and happy. But the drugs may not be safe. The theoretical mechanism behind the SSRIs doesn't appear to actually work. They're just selling pills, selling pills, selling pills. It's all about making money. Convincing you to believe that the doctor would never, ever give you anything that was bad for you. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call. Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You're the first one. I'm going to try to say this without getting emotional. To mention something that's very important. Everything you just said. I just came in from the garden. I came in right at the right time. Just prior to 1970, my husband was in the National Guard. I married in 1970. I was married to him till the late 1989. I loved being a housewife and a mother. I could work at home. I was a writer professionally with him and an artist on my own here, got some good galleries here, and I loved every minute of it. I loved taking screaming Boy Scouts to the All-Stars and to the Rotunda to see the Capitol in Austin. I loved my life, but I knew I was in trouble. I'd be in trouble on down the line. I don't relish talking about myself here, but I just want to say that it's only been these last 2 years, and this is 1977 now. It's only been, 2017. It's only been the last 2 years that I've had to not have him over to the house for the holidays. We've spent Easters together. This is way after our divorce. Okay. He remarried, got divorced again, all this. But I have to say this. It's the health care. I had to divorce to get enough money, to save up enough money to keep my inheritance in place so that he wouldn't spend it. He is not in a good shape now. He has Parkinson's and all kinds of things. But he is a German that liked his beer. He is a German that likes his beer. He was on these antidepressants from before I met him to now. The doctors cut him down on his drinking, but he's so volatile that I've been taking chances, but I can't have him here anymore. And this is coming right to the heart of me. When I was young, I could have been on Ritalin. Mm-hmm. I was so out to lunch. But I am extremely creative, and I don't mean to say that, I'm not going to give anyone any more on that. But it kills me every time I hear of kids going on Ritalin because they're not paying attention. They can always take college classes later. They can always take classes later. They can always catch up later. But feed their creativity. It's so important in any job you do to have a creative mind. And that's about all I can say without losing it, okay?
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Of course, when I was in school, we didn't have such a thing as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We called it teachers boring the heck out of me. And part of the problem is that the political constraints on public and high school education is that the focus is all put on the dullards, the unmotivated, and the bright kids who want to learn are being ignored. So, of course, they're going to look out the window. They're going to daydream. They're going to, look out the window. And so the idea was we'll dumb everybody down chemically to the same level, and therefore it will look like we've got a working education system. That is most assuredly not what actually happened. Sherry, got to let you go. Got to take a short station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we have a caller waiting on the line, John in Chicago. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Doing fine.
I got to tell you, I'm really I'm mentally prepared for the establishment to replace Trump with Pence. And the reason I say it, earlier in the show, you had said something like Fox News is backing off their rhetoric about him being wiretapped, saying he may have been.
No, that was Nunes came out and said that, and now Nunes has clarified it and said, yeah, that absolutely Trump and his transition team were being surveilled, and it had nothing to do with this suspected connection, this much hyped mythical connection to Russia. So we're in Watergate territory now.
Okay, well, that's what I'm worried about. Is like I saw the Maxine Waters, tweet today too, and I know the establishment would go along with it. Him making this Watergate accusation against the former president. I mean, it's one thing for him to be a media personality, but when you're president of the United States, and I think Fox News has been kind of a honey trap for Trump, that he tweets out what he sees on Fox News, and like a guy like Napolitano, they pulled him. If Napolitano went out there and advanced the idea that British intelligence helped Obama, quote-unquote, surveil Trump, if Trump sees that on TV and he tweets it out, I mean, he said Fox and Friends was his favorite show. He's already had O'Reilly, Hannity, Tucker Carlson. He's given interviews. He's treating those guys great. And it might be a honey trap for him because as far as I'm concerned, Fox News is still Zionist. I mean, they really are.
Okay, but let's back up here a little bit. First of all, Donald Trump has tweeted information from a wide variety of sources, not just Fox News here. And to be very honest, Fox News yanking of Napolitano for that one story, such a dramatic overreaction, tells me that Napolitano was probably onto something. And we're seeing all over the media where people who are talking about this story and not towing the government line, they're losing their jobs. The establishment is absolutely terrified that there could be a new Watergate scandal that lays the whole thing bare. They're in a very fragile position right now. The American people do not trust the political establishment. They do not trust the corporate media. They remember all the lies we've been told to get us into war. People my age remember Watergate. And right now we have a government that is more and more being seen as not only unconstitutional but illegitimate in the eyes of the ordinary American people. And a major scandal like a new Watergate, or Hillary really was selling secrets to a foreign government and getting money through the charitable foundation, any one of those could actually bring the whole thing crashing down.
Okay, well, like I said, my concern is if the establishment Democrats that hate him so much were to just go for it, I think a McCain and a Graham and a McConnell would go along with them because they don't like him either. And I think even Paul Ryan would turn on him. And that's what I'm afraid of.
Paul Ryan's already turned on.
Mind. The Democrats wouldn't mind if Pence was the president. They wouldn't mind. They'd get their wars and everything.
Yeah, Ryan's already turned on Trump. He was out there about 2 weeks ago trying to ridicule the idea of the surveillance. Trump really needs to start, like I said, he's got to stop playing defense. It's time for him to regain the initiative and go on the offense against these various people.
Well, I'm in his corner. Like he said, we might hear some things in the next coming weeks, which would be the onus for his initial tweet. And I want to hear that because even today in Sean Spicer's press, they went after him again, saying, "Does Trump regret the tweet saying Obama Watergate?" And Sean Spicer, of course, defended it, and he goes, Donald Trump stands by his tweet.
Yes.
So they're still pressing him on it, and it sounds to me that's what Maxine Waters wants to get him on. She wants to get him on how dare you accuse the former president of Watergate tactics. And I think they might even drop articles of impeachment on it if there's no there. But I think Trump...
There are no... Wait a minute. Hang on. There are no grounds for impeachment of the president for him tweeting out that there may have been a new Watergate. There are specific high crimes and misdemeanors you can be impeached for. I would think probably more than likely they're going to try and invoke the 25th Amendment, which can be done without the consent of the majority of Congress. And I think that's where they're going, because even the Democrats have to realize that with a majority GOP House and Senate, getting an impeachment and removal from office is very, very iffy, as opposed to being able to find some way to remove Donald Trump under the 25th Amendment. And I think the way that they're going to be going, along with this, he's paranoid to think he was being bugged, although now we know it actually was going on, I think what they're going to do is say that just the mere suspicion that Trump and Putin are working together is cause for the president to have to step down until this matter can be sorted out, and we'll sort it all out somewhere around, 2024.
Okay. All right. Well, no, like I said, we'll see it play out. I just don't want Fox News. Yeah, I don't trust them fully yet, and I don't want them to be a honey trap for Trump. He is using them as a media arm, not to propagandize the people, but they are really carrying his water, and if they got a little bit reckless and did something for the establishment, Trump might buy into it, and I don't want him to be like that.
Well, I don't think Trump completely trusts Fox News. They were certainly his friend during the election. Unfortunately, they've gone through a management change, and they're starting to pull back and be more establishment than they were before. I prefer them at this point, but I don't trust them either. Nobody should trust anything coming out of the corporate media anywhere at all. Use your own brains. Decide for yourself what's going on. Okay? All right, John, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Now, here is a bizarre story. We have been hearing lately about glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup weed killer. It's been on the market for a very, very long time. We're now getting these revelations that Monsanto colluded with the EPA to get approval by the EPA. They worked to suppress peer-reviewed studies saying there is a health risk here. Now we have the World Health Organization saying it is a probable human carcinogen. Glyphosate is now on the mandated California list of chemicals known to cause cancer. Monsanto keeps fighting back with all their lawyers and all their money. And it turns out Monsanto has a patent on glyphosate, not as a weed killer, but also as an antibiotic drug. They're trying to claim now that it is a medicine. They're claiming it is an antimicrobial agent. So they're going to go ahead and shoot it into your arms, even though it is a probable human carcinogen. Now then, where's the corporate media on this? Well, they're always on Monsanto's side here. Big pharma, big business, big advertising budgets. Look at all those spectacular, glitzy commercials for prescription medication all over the TV. The United States is only one of 2 industrialized countries that allow companies to advertise prescription medicine on television. All the other countries are saying that should be up to your doctor. You shouldn't be going on in and say, I demand... And the doctor will say, all right, sure. And as it turns out, according to a study, with the sole exception of CBS, every major media outlet in the United States shares at least one board member with at least one pharmaceutical company. And that is the reason why the corporate media won't report on any of this stuff. The boss says not to. And for more independent-minded media, all they have to do is go on in and say, we'll just yank our ads from you. Remember when California was trying to pass the proposition for mandatory GMO labeling, and Monsanto went in to all the TV stations and all the newspapers in California and said, if you do not oppose this mandatory GMO labeling bill, we will simply take our advertising dollars elsewhere. And Monsanto is a big, huge advertiser. And the station managers, newspaper editors were looking at that and saying, if they yank their ad budget from us, we're going to go out of business. So they caved in. They caved on in. And if you're getting sick, well, you know, that's just life in the... It's something you must accept and get used to live in the United States of America. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers and computer technology. Apparently, Microsoft has gone back to trying to force Windows 7 and 8.1 users to install Windows 10. And apparently this has to do with some of the newer generation Core i3, i5, and i7 AMD 7th generation processors and Qualcomm's 8996 processors, where Microsoft is now saying that they're not going to update Windows 7 and 8.1 on those processors. The new processors require Windows 10. So we're back to this, you will use the Windows we tell you to use, your shrine hunt you. Wall-to-wall spyware, intellectual property software, and everything else is pretty lousy. And again, I tried to give Windows 10 an honest test. We had a laptop that was dedicated to supporting Claire's Choir. There wasn't a lot on there outside of the music software and the music files, and so we flipped off the thing saying automatic update to Windows 10, and it was a disaster. It came on up, it insisted that I log into the new Windows 10 using my Microsoft credentials, which I didn't even have at that time. Then it went through this little weird flip thing and came on back and said, we're reconfiguring it again, and all of Claire's music files had vanished. Apparently Windows 10 didn't think they should be where I wanted to put them. And when I say vanished, I don't mean they were over there in the trash can where I could recover them. They were simply gone. So I hit the little button that says go back to your previous operating system, and as it turns out, that is not 100% complete. And from that point on, the machine was in this twilight zone. Half Windows 7, half Windows 10, couldn't do anything with it. Literally wound up throwing the thing away. It was that useless. Now, apparently, Microsoft Outlook, Skype, OneDrive have been hit by another authentication issue. And it happened 2 weeks ago, and it looked like it was happening again yesterday. And I think it was more far-reaching than just Outlook, Skype, and OneDrive, because I was having an issue with the United States Post Office website. And that came about because a while ago, over on eBay, I finally decided to order one of those Raspberry Pi kits. I have this interface box left over from a project I did for Marvel Comics years ago that plugs into a USB port, and it gives you a whole array of dry contact switches, relays, sense switches to interact. It's basically a digital controller. And I figured, oh, I'll get the Pi, I'll slap it on the outside, and I've got the beginnings of a smart controller for my telescope mount. Be a lot of fun. And the post office tracking said that the computer was delivered to my mailbox on Monday, and it wasn't. It's obviously been misdelivered. So I went over to the USPS and I tried to sign in with my account. Wouldn't accept it. So I said, okay, I'll set up a new account. No matter what name I put, username, it said this name already exists. So I couldn't even get into the USPS website. I'm wondering if it's linked with this authentication. Maybe everybody's using the same authentication server or something. But it was very, very frustrating, and apparently I'm not the only person who was having problems, because when I called the 800 number for the United States Postal Service, it was a 1-hour wait to talk to a technician. So I don't have my Raspberry Pi, and the post office insists they delivered it to me, and I can't seem to disabuse them of that notion. It's amazing. Now then, apparently hackers are claiming that they have compromised 300 million Apple account IDs and passwords, and unless Apple pays them a ransom, $75,000 in Bitcoin or $100,000 in iTunes gift cards, they will wipe out all of the iPhones and iClouds. 300 million iPhones. This is set for April 7th. Now, on my iPhone and iTunes, I specifically checked the box that says save the backups on the local disk, so I'm not concerned about this. But apparently, anybody getting into your Apple ID account can remotely wipe your phone and lock you out of the features of the phone itself. Gee, I wonder where the NSA is in all of this. This is a major, major threat. Maybe it is the NSA. Maybe they're going to wipe out all the iPhones of people who dare question the official government narrative. Now then, there is a huge botnet out there. It's considered the worst in the world, the Nekurs botnet. And for a while, it was out there feeding ransomware all over, but as more and more people improved the security on their computers, they backed off on that. But the botnet has been reactivated, and it is being used to send out spam mail on penny stock pump and dump messages. These are the emails you get where it says, once in a lifetime opportunity, you want to buy thus and such a stock. And unfortunately, a lot of people are naive enough to believe they're getting genuine, good stock information randomly in the email, and they'll call their broker and say, buy this thing. And the pump and dumpers will just wait for the price to get run up from all the buying. Then they'll sell out their holdings at a huge markup and crash the price of the stock. And they're cheating all the people who fall for the scam, as well as destroying the company involved. And that's one of the worst things about these stock scammers. In addition to cheating the people who fall for the scam, they can literally wipe out an entire company. Now, let's talk about water. There's an interesting story here that came out of Mercola.com. The war on water is a very real crisis. And what they're talking about here is the dwindling water supply and the argument over whether people should get it or agriculture should get it or industry should get it. There's apparently not quite enough to go around. I remember when Claire and I first moved out here to Hawaii, and all we heard every day was there's a water shortage, there's a water shortage, there's a water shortage. Put a restrictor in your shower, do this, do that. And then we went through a real estate boom up where all the plantations, sugar plantations, so pineapple plantations for the most part, were shut down and the land turned over for development. And as soon as that happened, the water shortage went away. The state of Hawaii was trying to get the people to use less water in order to make it available for agriculture. Now, apparently over in the San Joaquin Valley in California, they have extracted so much water out of the ground, the valley is actually sinking. In some areas, it has dropped 28 feet. And it's apparently accelerating. We're running out of water. 2 of California's largest freshwater aquifers are now hopelessly contaminated with fracking fluid. At one point they were saying, well, we'll use that water on the agricultural produce, until somebody pointed out there's no way to get those fracking chemicals off the food. When you buy it at the store, you can't wash it off. It's not going to come off. It's going to be soaked into the peel, into the rind, into the actual pulp. So we could actually see countries go to war over water. It's already happening. Israel wants that Litani River in Lebanon. That was their objective the last time they invaded. Anyway. Now, over in Louisiana, they've got this one town, St. Joseph, which went through the same thing that Flint, Michigan did. Lead-tainted water. And they're making a big deal over the fact that they finally managed to overhaul the water system in the town of St. Joseph, so the water is now more or less safe to drink. Unfortunately, dozens of other towns in Louisiana still have lead contamination because your health is just not that important. We're in a war economy, and you're just going to have to learn how to tolerate lead-contaminated drinking water, or the terrorists will win. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at the brouhaha over Judge Gorsuch. And apparently the Democrats are now dropping hints that they will filibuster the confirmation vote. And as Ted Cruz pointed out earlier, when Gorsuch was up for his federal judgeship, not a single Democrat voted against him. This is not about Gorsuch. This is about the Democrats trying to get Donald Trump any way they can. And I look at the behavior of these people in the Capitol building, and I want to do an ice bucket challenge on all of them and say, cut it out. Stop being such children. You're setting a bad example for the real children. Now, we are getting word from Christopher Ford, the White House National Security Council Senior Director, saying that Trump is going to honor the Iran nuclear deal. And this is good to hear because we've been seeing in the corporate media about Iran bad, Iran bad. We've got to go in and we've got to get Iran. Of course, I did, during the commercial break, put up that official U.S. military enlistment form. Please download it, print it up, have a bunch of them with you, and from now on, anytime you see anybody saying, we have to go into, pick a country, you hand them a form and say, there you are. And they'll say, I'm not going to sign up for the military. Well, you know, this is a walk your talk moment. If you are not willing to go over there and to actually carry out the war that you think is necessary, then please shut the heck up. I'm getting sick and tired of people who are telling us how important it is to go over there and have a war while they stay here at home in comfort and safety. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you very much. I was interested in knowing your opinion, at least at this point. I know things are evolving, but about a couple of the people around Trump, if they're really going to be helpful. I was thinking in particular of Priebus and Vice President Pence. I just have doubts about, you know, some of these people. And
I agree. I agree. Trump has made a number of hideous mistakes. He appointed Priebus chief of staff. He was trying to basically rebuild bridges with the Republican Party, which had worked so hard against him last year, with an eye toward possibly having more of a coalition of the GOP in 2020. And it's not going to happen, because the issue really is not Republican versus Democrat. It's the establishment, drug money-fueled, corrupt Clinton-Bush duocracy against the rest of us. And again, it goes back to my primary complaint about Trump, that going into the Oval Office, he is as dangerously naive about the reality of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter was. And he shouldn't have had Priebus. He should not have continued James Comey. That much is very obvious at this point. It's great that Sessions has fired all the Obama-appointed U.S. attorneys, but that's not far enough. All of the Obama holdovers in the White House, in the executive office building, have to be given their pink slips. And the incoming president has the right to do that. Many of them have. Trump needs to start staffing that White House with people who come from outside the D.C. political machine, who are not compromised or already bought, owned, blackmailable by that establishment.
Yeah. I hope he, I guess, well, we would hope that he would eventually get to that decision, I guess.
He may have waited too late. He may have waited too long. At this point, he can't fire Comey without the corporate media equating it to Nixon's firing of Archibald Cox. So, yeah, it's a political issue. Politics is perception, and Trump firing Comey now is going to be perceived quite differently than if Trump had simply said, I've asked Comey to resign on Inauguration Day, and here is our new head of the FBI.
Yeah, I had thought about that the other day, that gee, why didn't he just tell him, you know, this is it on January 20th, you know?
Oh, and by the way, Comey's bank, HSBC, has been caught in yet another drug money laundering scandal. Steve, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Steve in Virginia, and I'm absolutely in agreement with you that Donald Trump made quite a few mistakes coming into the Oval Office. He was trying to be magnanimous in victory and say there's no hard feelings and you can stay and keep your jobs. But again, he comes out of the world of business where most people's first loyalty is to whoever is signing that paycheck. And that is not the way Washington, D.C. works. And Donald Trump needs to stop thinking like a businessman, and he needs to start thinking like a leader. And your people management skills for those two paradigms are vastly different. And Trump really needs to pick up on that. Trump is getting bad advice from the people he has put around himself. He needs to develop a kitchen cabinet of advisors who are not officially advisors. They don't have to go through congressional vetting. They're not being shoved on him by the political machine. But he needs some outside advice from people who are not part of that corrupted system. And he needs it badly.
Yeah, I like the kitchen cabinet idea. That makes a lot of sense. I wish he would do that. Yeah, I was going to say, we heard this show the other day, one of the talk radio people, and he said he had interviewed actually Pence recently, and he asked him a pointed question about the health care, some of those aspects of what this health care plan is going to be, and he described it as Pence doing a little shuffle on it. That was the word he used. So he didn't really want to get into too much detail.
Well, I think what was really significant was, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, Julian Assange came on out and said that there is a plot underway in Washington, D.C. to get Donald Trump out of the Oval Office and replace him with Pence. And Pence just came right on out and responding, saying, well, what a ridiculous idea. That's completely silly. It's laughable that you would even think that. And then, of course, today we have Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein and all these other people saying, yeah, Trump's going to be gone. Just get used to the idea.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's too bad these people are just so contrary. They don't really care about unifying or helping the country.
No, they don't. They're out for themselves. They're out for the money and the power. And when the Founding Fathers set up this country, these people in high positions were under very serious constraints because the Founding Fathers understood that the curse of political power is that it attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. And so how do you set up a ruling structure that automatically gets rulers who really do feel their responsibility to the American people? And we see this happening in the life cycle of nations throughout history, where there'll be a collapse or a revolution, and there'll be the formation of a new government, and that first government that comes on in are generally there to try and make things better. Then, over time, the population gets complacent. The government gets hijacked by oligarchs until it leads up to a situation of tyranny and dictatorship, leading to either another collapse or another revolution.
Yeah. I wish Trump would remember some of the sayings of the founders. I mean, as you know, they spoke right to these very situations and gave warnings. Be careful, be vigilant, and it just seems like nobody's thinking about any of that.
Well, what's that old saying? It's hard to remember your objective is to drain the swamp when you're up to your rear end in alligators, and it certainly would apply to Donald Trump. They're keeping him very, very busy where he's almost totally reactionary, and he's not able to think forward very much. I will give him credit for this. I thought it was very cool that Donald Trump placed a wreath on the tomb of Andrew Jackson. And I think that was a great thing for him to do. It certainly sends a message to the money junkies.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't realize that. I'm glad that he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the comment. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the news here, we're starting to see more and more come on out from the Intelligence Committee hearing. Nunes is now out there saying, yes, the Trump team communications were captured by intelligence community surveillance, and they're saying it had nothing to do with Russia. The other gentleman slipped up the other day and basically said it wasn't a criminal matter. It was an intelligence operation. And that puts us in Watergate territory. Now remember, it was a little over 2 years between the Watergate break-in itself and Richard Nixon's resignation. So we're dealing with what appears to be a repeat of Watergate, and it's probably going to take us a while to get through to the resolution. Maybe not more than 2 years, because now we have the Internet and the independent media on our side. But it's not going to happen overnight. And we're going to have to keep pushing on this. If we start saying, oh, forget about it, it's no big deal, well, then the deep state will relax and kick back and say, we snookered him one more time, by golly. Now, Donald Trump is killing the UN Climate Change Initiative. He's calling it an elaborate hoax. Boy, do I agree with him on that one. It was a hoax. That's what it was. Classic politics. Take something that happens naturally, declare it a crisis, and then offer to sell a solution in exchange for more tax money and less freedom. All right, let's take another phone call. Nick in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling about Devin Nunes, and I looked at the video about his confirmation of surveillance. One of the things that concerned me was, at the time, he does admit, or, you know, he says that there is confirmed surveillance. One of the press people in a yellow shirt, a lady in the audience, asked whether or not it was legal or whether or not it was happenstance. And it just seems to me, you know, he did say that he believes that it was legal surveillance of Trump somehow. And so it makes me think that they're just going to back it down that way and all of a sudden make it just okay and it's legal to do that.
Well, again, supposedly the Obama administration had a FISA warrant, but that warrant was obtained through fraudulent means. So if this were to be prosecuted as a criminal case, then yes, that evidence would be thrown on out. But at this point, what they're trying to say is, yeah, we thought it was legal at the time, and we're sorry that it wasn't. But one thing should be very obvious at this point. All this surveillance on Trump did not find anything that could be used against him. And
I guess we kind of have to count our blessings on that one. That, to me, that's a sort of a win/lose. It's kind of like we want to get Hillary for the really bad stuff, but we'll put her away for anything minor. Same kind of analogy to me. Okay, you know, we can't prove that this was illegal, but at least we proved that nothing went on between Trump and Russia. I would hope that the public had enough attention span to actually pay attention to the details of the fraudulent website that they made up about Trump and using that to get the FISA warrant. I just think that's going to be lost on a lot of people, and the corporate media will never, ever report that. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, that's why the corporate media is losing their audience. To the point where they're actually using Chinese botnets to artificially inflate the clicks on their website. That's how desperate they are. They understand they're losing the war for the minds of America, and the one thing that they could do to win audience back, start reporting the truth, doesn't fit their business model. The people in the corporate media are not paid those $1 million salaries to tell the American people the truth about anything. Those people in the corporate media are paid those $1 million salaries to be very, very convincing lawyers to sell you the next war, the next policy, the next car, the next president, the next fashion statement, and the next prescription drug. That's what they're paid that money to do. And they can't change their business model, or the people who are writing the checks to keep that whole corporate media model going are going to put their checkbooks away. At this point, it's only a matter of time before we see the corporate media really dissolve, and the high ground in the war for the minds of America is already here in the independent media.
Well, I agree with that. One of the concerns I have is that it's actually a double positive-negative reinforcement for these corporate media people, because, yes, they'll lose all their money if they start telling the truth, but I believe they're probably threatened to lie how we tell you to lie, or this will happen to you and your families. I think it goes that far.
Well, it doesn't even have to go that far. I mean, the firing of Napolitano for broaching the GCHQ link in the Obamagate, that may have been done to set an example, saying, you know, if we can get rid of somebody as prominent as Judge Napolitano, we can make short work of you, so you better stick to reporting what's on that computer monitor.
So they did verify that he was fired. At last I'd heard he was benched. I didn't look further.
I saw one article where it basically said he was fired.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks for everything that you do, and hopefully I can get to using the website a little bit better. I was emailing with you during the show about that. I'm that guy. So,
okay, I know who you are.
And, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. This seems like a good opportunity to bring something up. Right now, hijackware is running epidemic across the Internet. And by that I mean these are malwares that are sent through emails, websites that are dishonest, and they plant on your computer, on your smartphone, on your tablet, and what they do is they basically insert themselves in front of the website you want to see, and they put up their own ads, and they obliterate the ads on the website itself. And obviously, they're well paid by their advertisers, and they're making money off of other people's work, and more to the point, they are destroying the revenue of the legitimate advertisers on those sites. So if you are visiting whatreallyhappened.com, or for that matter any other website, and there seem to be a huge surge in the number of popovers and everything, check your system for malware. It is out of control at this point, and obviously nobody in the government is interested in fixing it at this point. As far as What Really Happened is concerned, there are no popovers. There are pop-unders, and there are some things that slide in on the bottom within the central frame. But if you're seeing an actual popover ad, you have got hijackware. Check your system. Let's take a phone call from Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, thanks for taking my call. I wasn't going to call in today, but I was just listening to the Sane Progressive, and she was doing an analysis of Rachel Maddow's propaganda, supposedly Russian hacking into Bernie Sanders, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, she did a really good analysis of it, and it inspired me to call in because I had a conversation with a coworker, and I've been trying to defend Trump and my choice, but the type of information they're getting is so ridiculous. For example, my coworker was commenting on how Donald Trump touches his daughter inappropriately, and I'm sitting here thinking, you have to be kidding me. We've got Obama dropping bombs on the poorest country, or at least aiding in this type of activity.
You want to talk about somebody touching girls inappropriately? Look at the videos of Joe Biden. You know, but for anybody who comes up on, well, I heard it on corporate media that Trump is this and Trump is that. Just ask them a question, okay? When Hitler was in power in Germany, when Stalin was in power in Russia, did their equivalent of the corporate media ever report on the bad things that were being done? Of course not. And the same thing is true of America's corporate media today. If you assume that our media is any more honest and trustworthy than the media in Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia, then you are a naive fool. You are a con artist's wet dream.
Right. Listen, I saw those videos of Biden. There's actually still photos of Obama, totally inappropriate contact with children. He's got a child in his lap, and he looks like he's an octopus engulfing her. There's also audio of Biden. But getting back to the reason I called in, one of the most valuable things you do at the end of the show is offer advice on how to approach people slowly. But I think we need to take it a step further, particularly someone like me. I get passionate, and I think it pushes people away. But
yes,
I think we should formulate a really detailed approach on how to, like, bullet points of, like, listen, A, B, and C. And the fact that people are concerned about how Trump touched his daughter shows you how far removed they are from the actual fires that are being lit and burning out of control, and they're worried about these insignificant distractions. It's mind-boggling to me, and I hope
but you remember, you're in San Francisco.
Approach to just diffuse.
You're in San Francisco. You're literally in the belly of the beast when it comes to liberal fanaticism. And, unfortunately, one of the very successful things that Hillary Clinton succeeded in doing last year was convincing the LGBT community that Donald Trump is going to send them all off to the concentration camps. And they bought it. They actually bought into it. And that's why they're constantly on the attack against Donald Trump. Ellen DeGeneres was out there foaming at the mouth at him. And they don't seem to understand. They've fallen for a dirty trick by the Hillary campaign. And people need to back off and start really analyzing objectively what they're being told by politicians and by the corporate media. And the first thing you have to understand is they are using your beliefs in certain things to enslave you. There's absolutely no evidence that Donald Trump was going to send the LGBTs into concentration camps, but they were convinced to believe it and then act on that belief. And that's absolutely a lousy way to be running this kind of thing. But again, my advice is approach people slowly. Find the ones who are asking questions. If somebody is just dead set that they're for Hillary and against Donald Trump, don't waste your time with them anymore. Just ignore them and say, okay, fine, we agree to disagree.
One last point. My sister watches this guy, Trevor Noah. I never heard of him. He took over The Daily Show.
Yes.
And it's so insidious what they're doing, using comedy to undermine the Trump administration. She's hook, line, sinker on this, and I think we need to use that type of weapon, too. Like, one of the great things about your show is your humor that you drop in from time to time. It really makes it palatable, and it brings me back to sanity, because it is insane where we are and where we're going, but they're using comedy, Saturday Night Live, that guy Noah, and it's like, how dare you come to America from South Africa and criticize our country? I would never consider
That's what
doing
he's
that,
being paid to do.
Comedy is such a powerful tool.
That's what he's being paid to do. I don't think Trevor Noah really cares about American politics one way or the other. He wanted that center seat on The Daily Show. And by the way, Claire and I stopped watching The Daily Show when he took over from Stewart. And just that's it.
I never heard of the guy until I was listening to what I go. What are you listening to? And it was The Daily Show. But the Saturday Night Live, from every possible media outlet, they're just pumping this anti-Trump BS.
I don't watch them either. And I'll tell you one more thing. I got to let you go because we've got to do a commercial break. I would question the accuracy of the claimed viewership numbers for these programs. They're lying about everything else. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program. I'm going to take one more phone call. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, James. Good day, Michael. Yeah, that last caller, he's right. Republicans should wheel out guys like Anthony Weiner, and you got the Chucky Schumer, and you got all these other Franken. You got to put those in commercials, and the Republican billionaires should run ads about these clowns, have their own comedy show with those three clowns. Speaking about Weiner, Michael, this guy Weiner, I would like the Republican Congress, the Republican House, to really do an investigation on Weiner and what he really does know about Hillary and Emma Ubadine. That's where the whole key in lies, Michael. The key to this whole thing with Trump. And by the way, the breaking news is Trump was being tapped. It's all over all the news. I'm sure you heard about it.
Yep.
They found out, yes, he is being tapped, and that's the truth. Weiner probably, if they can get a hold of Weiner, the Republicans, they can grill him. I guarantee he'll crack like an egg, and you'll get all the information you want about Hillary and all the Russians and all that crap.
Okay, Tom, calm down. Let me address what's going on here, because there's an ugly reality, which is that in D.C. politics there are two classes of secrets. There are the small secrets, like Anthony Weiner sending naked pictures of his wiener to underage girls, that could be used to get him out of office and so forth and so on. Then there are the great big secrets that are so terrible they would bring the entire government down. And everybody's going to protect those secrets because they want to keep on being senators and presidents and everything else here. And a good example of that, of course, would be Watergate, where Nixon was forced to resign, and then Gerald Ford issued blanket pardons to shut down any further questions about why Richard Nixon, when his re-election was a study in foregone conclusions, still arranged for the burglary of the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, because the answer to that question would have uncovered the links between Nixon and the assassination of John F. Kennedy and confirmed for all Americans that there had indeed been a government cover-up of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That was a scandal that could have brought the entire United States government down. And that's why, you know, the really ugly things out there that Hillary was doing at the State Department, if I am correct that she was selling secrets to foreign governments and using her charitable foundation to collect the money, nobody wants that to come out. Even Hillary Clinton's worst enemies are going to work to keep that hidden because it's their own job they're protecting.
Right on, Michael. Michael, also, what about this mayor in London who's saying this is a new normal, the terrorism in these European countries? You got a Muslim mayor screaming at this. That's going to be the new normal.
Well, he actually made the comment about a year and a half ago, but it's being reprised in the media because of today's attack at Parliament, along with the very obvious conclusion that we all have to draw from this: the war on terror has failed. Okay, all of the body searches, the crotch grabbing, all of the stealing of our appliances out of the suitcase, it doesn't really work. There's only one way to stop terrorism, and that is stop screwing around with other people's countries. Thank you for the call, Tom. There's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please make a point of sharing everything that you have learned here with everybody that you know. This is a fight for the future of our nation and indeed of our entire planet. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.